Greetings, everyone. I would very much like to welcome you to the video on which I'm filming today, which is essentially going to be centered around zero two and how I would very and how essentially how the characteristics of her life is essentially the types of cells that she has, the organelles in which she has. For example, the types of atoms that are found within her organism are water atoms, oxygen, potassium, etc. What? How many different types of cells does the living organism have? Are there any specialized cells that have what to do? How the types of cells she has are classic blood cells, T cells, yellow blood cells, which only exist in all classes of sapiens. These are specialized because they can transmit via binding inside of Franks, which is a giant robot. They transfer to anyone who has ingested classic sapien DNA and gather yellow blood cells through interacting with them in the Franks. How are the cells organized in their cells, tissues, e.g., skin, stomach, brain, etc., and how many different organs does the organism have? The cells make up of all the different organs, vessels, and skin that exist alongside with our horns and bones, as well as a tissue, 70 organs, which is how many organs they have total. They have a brain, heart, kidneys, lungs, intestines, veins, salivary glands, heart-wave glands, mandibular glands, sublingual glands, etc. How long does it take for the cells to grow and divide into different cells divided at different rates? Her cells grow and divide at 10 seconds per cell, and unlike human beings, class of sapiens, cells grow at the very same rate. How long does it take your organism to fully develop from a to an adult? How do the cells change over time? Uh, what, since 20 years is essentially how long it takes for a class of sapiens to develop from a baby to adult, and the cells evolve with the environment that they endure at that time during that time period. How long does our organism live for? 100 years, give or take. What type of food does our organism eat? What type of macromolecules, big molecules, aka molecules are left found in those foods? Steak, honey, tomatoes, lettuce, various fish are essential with molecules are iron, potassium, sodium, glucose, water, vitamins, protein. How are the foods used to fuel the cell and sort of make chemical energy, ATP. Think about how protein, sugars, fats, nucleic acids are digested to make ATP. They used to fuel her by running your cells with high concentration of protein, high functionality for nucleic acids, and sugars to influence the cell and tissue metabolism responsiveness to hormonal and other signals. How do the cells in our living organism get nutrients and molecules that are needed for life? Oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, vitamins, glucose, sodium, potassium, etc. Think about how your cells carry out diffusion and autoposis. The cells diffuse with magma energy powered by the Franks. When going into pilot engagement, the cells go through osmosis where they can consume food. How does the cells in your living organism communicate with the environment? Passive transport, active transport, endocytosis, exocytosis, etc. But enough glucose to supply energy to cells to prevent them from becoming ill. Uh, and essentially, the source of that is Bones Green Skies, produced on 2018, April 4th, from Darling and Franks. 2018B, May 17th, Princess of Caxasars from Darling and Franks. 2020, November 14th, episode 1, Alone and Lonesome from Darling and Franks. And 2018A, April 4th, Become Human from Darling and Franks. 2018, March 19, What a Classic Star Looks Like Under a Microscope, which is the first video that we're going to be watching here. This is actually an interesting, funny study. Ossified tendons, the study of ossified tendons, and the study of histology within those tendons is the fact that you can figure out how the cells and organelles within each dinosaurs interact with each other through diffusion and osmosis. Essentially, diffusion would be essentially a lot of the different how certain molecules within the cells go in and out, whereas osmosis is essentially the process of how those cells would transmit different forms of potentially nutrients. Um, the process of which biomolecules of solvent tend to pass through a semi-permeable membrane from a less concentrated solution to a more concentrated one. So essentially, um, if there was a high concentration rate in a certain body of water, which is probably the biggest solvent out there, versus a less concentrated rate, then a lot of the cells would go to the less concentrated one, because that's just how that process works. Whereas diffusion is then equalization, whereas osmosis is transmissible method of transmitting molecules via solvent through a semipermeable membrane, which can quite literally be a lot of different things than you would think it would be. And looking at the ossified tendons is a really good way of figuring that out, and figuring out a 30-year-old paleohistological being, such as the dinosaurs, which is what we'll compare 02 to, as she herself is a Klaxosaur, which is the type of fictitious dinosaur, which evolved later to become the Klaxosapien, which is essentially a lot more which Klaxosaurs and Klaxosapiens a lot more comparable with Cambrian explosion creatures, which are multi-cell organisms, which possessed a lot of different odd structures, some vertebrate, some non-invertebrate, of which did not need to necessarily consume nutrients at the rate at which they did. They didn't need to use the restroom. They didn't necessarily reproduce all the same way. They either reproduce sexually or asexually. A lot of the times, asexual reproduction by these simply meant that they would either transmit their DNA through a manner of just simply transmitting their DNA through physical contact, or they would simply just split off by mitosis, which is a very fascinating form of genetic reproduction. That is which a lot of the different beings within Klaxosapio society were good at. Understanding posture and biomechanics is actually also very important, because 02 tends to always have very perfect posture. She's roughly 5'11" to 6 feet tall, which is very tall for almost anybody's standards. And her biomechanics are very well, because not only is she very like agendered, but also very much biomechanically engineered in a way that not only does her body resist gravity fatigue and resistance to high G forces, but she also has the ability to, whenever her cells become very supercharged with hormonal rushes of adrenaline, that is when she becomes red and she goes beast mode, which is when her is when her pharynx goes into stampede mode, and that's when she essentially becomes more chaotic, a lot more monstrous, a lot more like the Klaxosaur, in which she is cloned after, which is kind of a spoiler for a lot of things in the anime. She's essentially a clone of Code 001, for which she's Code 002. She's the only surviving clone because a lot of the others had died off due to genetic malfunctions. She's the most genetically functioning clone of the Klaxosaur princess as they know it. They also do something very similar in developing very sense, but they examine medical examinations of what is known as yellow T cells, which are these types of yellow cells in which not only are they very like not like how you'd expect um, to see in the human body, but they essentially appear in a lot of classes sapiens because they have they run on this thing called magnet energy, which is something that essentially we would require food and water. They would essentially require magnet energy to function much as like we would require our food. So and because magnet energy is very yellow, they develop yellow cells, which to us would very much be like red blood cells that we all know and love. This is and through this, the reason why humans are able to pilot the Franks and defeat the Classic stars as they are is through making sure that they do this eugenics reproduction of making sure that they build human children in the lab, as older generations have found their ways of reproduction to be almost significantly useless because they basically sacrifice the reproductive organs to become mortal. Therefore, they build their next generations in a lab, and they with these high yellow blood cell concentrations in order to be able to pilot the ranks, in order to be able to defend them, basically raising child soldiers. Why does that sound familiar? Oh yeah, that's the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Anyway, that's off topic. Um, as this happens, this is very interesting in terms of cellular examination because if you examine how they managed the yellow blood cell count, if it was way too high, then that essentially would lead to them slowly but surely becoming a Homo sapien, and therefore they would forbid the rest of the children from essentially knowing what happened to that child, and they would be sent off to some sort of institution where no one would know what would happen to them, or if there was too little, then the same thing would happen to them as well. They would either die or would get sent to some sort of institution where they were essentially gotten rid of after they received their yellow blood cell vaccination, which was essentially assigned to them if their yellow blood cell count was too low. They had a 12% survivability rate of receiving this vaccination, of which would increase their yellow blood cell count if they survived. But had they not, they would have very much not have been around to see the results. Uh, Kind of getting back to this, I feel like it's kind of um, interesting to examine how this compares to Zero Two and how they explain it in this video. Oh yeah, this is actually pretty interesting. Essentially, one of the going back to the yellow blood cell discussion, what was really important about how Zero Two had such a high yellow blood cell count is that a lot of the stamen they had this pistol stamen relationship where it's kind of like a flower to where the stamen was essentially the pilot that essentially controlled the frames, whereas the pistol was sort of like some sort of power source, a battery, if you will, for the Franks itself. Zero Two herself with a pistol, and the stamen she chose was Hito because she was the only one compatible with that, and a lot of the time these pistol stamen relationships were male female partners, and the partner killer rumor was essentially based on the fact that various bloods, various yellow blood cells, the fact that she had such a high blood cell count made it so that her capacity for powering the Franks was often higher than her stamen's ability to pilot the Franks. And because of that, they were often unable to essentially pilot the Franks as she was more than three times because just none of them were powerful enough. And because of the fact that Hiro has the same amount of as yellow blood cells as Zero-2 has, it kind of gives her the special ability to be able to pilot with him. But she doesn't just stay up chemo a lot like you see her doing here, which is when her hormonal changes essentially become very much like just supercharged to the point where her bones organs are going in motion, enabling themselves to essentially defy the laws of physics as she goes into this sort of superhuman Hulk esque way of kind of like going into what most would consider beast mode, and but this is really just when the hormones go into all the different cells, kind of filling her with this sort of hormonal adrenaline as the glucose powers her cells to go to her brain, and that's what essentially gives her this overpowered state in which she's able to backflip and fight a Klaxosar that is 300 times her size. And because of that, because of the fact that there's this exchange of yellow blood cells going in between these different organelles and organisms through the stage of diffusion, and or actually be more accurate to describe it as osmosis, as you have one organism with a high yellow blood cell concentration and another organism with a lower yellow blood cell concentration. The state of osmosis would most likely be a way for them to transfer their yellow blood cell count past a semipermeable membrane, that of course being their skin and flesh. And because of that, they are much more able to control the Franks as they continue riding together. But alas, allow us to continue. A lot of people say that the more Klaxosar she kills, the closer she gets to becoming human. She does not become more human as time goes on. She essentially makes her stamen, her partner, called 016, aka Hito, essentially, because he's getting more yellow blood cells, she becomes more of a Klaxosapien along with her. And that allows them to become essentially two and one Klaxosapiens among the same as they are in due time. This is an interesting scene because, as you can clearly see, what happens is that because her level of yellow blood cell count has reached far beyond hers is already in the hundreds, and his is like almost at zero. Because of this, what essentially she does is she goes ahead and becomes red, and essentially has him in this chokehold, which is essentially how uh, they transmit. They not only connect physically, but also connect psychologically because her genes essentially intertwine with his, creating this. Um, sort of diffusion state between them to where they both of them recover their own memories and they manage to become one in this instance. Uh, in that instance, what they mostly just do is what they essentially do in this instance is they connect psychologically through a process of psychological diffusion, kind of recovering memories of which they lost by an experiment. Uh, and excuse me for a moment. I'm going to essentially continue the rest of this in part two. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Subscribe to Doctor Physic on Silicon and in my channel Nerd Shred as well. This is a project actual content coming up next.